How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Black Water Vampire, or the Black Water Vamp : Re. Not sure what the stylization is about, not particularly scary, but whatever. This is from 2014 and is written and directed by Evan Tramel and stars Danielle Lozeau, Andrea Monier, Anthony Fanelli, and Robin Schaefer, with Bill Oberst Jr. And I guess before I get into this, I am going to have a few gripes with this movie, but I do want to say, in general, it was okay. It was totally watchable. I'm a fan of found footage movies, and I'm always happy to watch another one. And it did have a pretty decent ending and a final shot that was admittedly kind of goofy, but also made the movie. It does have some of its own ideas, especially towards the end, and I wasn't ever really bored or anything. But this movie definitely has faults, and the thing that everybody's gonna tell you about this, and oh boy is it true, is this is basically a remake of the Blair Witch Project. And I know, like, movies will build off each other, and if you're talking about movies in the same subgenre, then yeah, there will be similarities, but this one I feel probably does cross the line a little bit too much. The same basic plot structure: go to a town, interview the people, find out the local legends, and then go into the woods and be hunted and picked off by said legends. It's like, replace the witch with the vampire, replace the woods with snowy woods, replace the Blair Witch Stickman with a spray-painted symbol. That's not as scary. And I mean, they even do the shot. You know, the most famous and iconic shot from Blair Witch Project that they turned into the poster, where she takes the camera, films herself from a worm's eye view, and starts to break down a bit. They do that shot almost verbatim, and it's really hard to miss, you know? And the thing is, the Blair Witch Project did it better, and I mean, like, watching these two movies back to back, you can really see why the Blair Witch Project was so famous, or at least part of the reason. The paranoia, the intensity, being alone in the woods is just so much stronger in the Blair Witch Project. And the lore, learning all about the witch, again, so much stronger in the Blair Witch Project. The movie gets better towards the end, I won't spoil it, but things of course do heat up, as with most found footage movies, and at the end of the movie you do get more of this movie's own original ideas, which I do like. But the biggest difference between this and Blair Witch, look at the cover. You never see the Blair Witch, but the Black Water Vampire, he's right there on the cover, ready to say hello to you. And the thing is, like, you don't see it until the last act, but, I mean, from the trailer, from the cover, we know what it looks like. It's the exact opposite of the Blair Witch in that regard. And the thing is, I went into this movie knowing I was going to see it, and when they finally show the vampire at the end, it's a really good shot. It's way off in the distance, hanging upside down from a tree, and it's this case of, it's far away, I can't quite make it out, but that looks like the iconic image of a vampire hanging upside down. That's creepy, that's vague. And then they wreck the shot. The cameraman pulls off this perfect, super intense zoom and goes right into the vampire's face, and then we see the horror movie monster in close up. And I mean, he looks okay. He's Nosferatu with more teeth and a dog nose. Yeah, he's fine, but I really wish we didn't have these close-ups. I mean, later on there are some jump scares, and it just didn't feel super intense, I guess, because we already knew what the creature looked like. And like later on in the movie, when you see him creeping around in the night vision, that looks really cool. I like seeing some of the creature, but we definitely saw too much of it. But I guess what I want to say, you know, the Blair Witch Project is a good story. Reusing some of those bones, it's going to be obvious, but not necessarily bad. The whole movie was watchable, was okay, but it did get more interesting towards the end of the movie when they introduced more of their own unique ideas. As it stands now, it's fine. It's just you gotta put that comparison out of your head. In fact, I kind of wish this movie was called The Black Water Vampire Project. Just go ahead and admit you're a mockbuster, then we wouldn't have to pretend, right? Anyway, in order to analyze this movie further, I'm going to start talking about the plot and analyzing it. I won't do any major spoilers. I want to dig in. I want to see what works and doesn't. I don't have to talk about the very end of the movie to do that, but let's go into a deeper analysis section. We open up meeting our characters. The main girl is the host of the documentary and I believe the director. She was the one who wanted to make this. She grew up in this town and it would be her legend they're talking about. You get her best friend, who I believe is the producer role. They met a guy on the internet to be the director of photography, so he is a little bit more of an outsider, which I think is nice, and later in the movie he'll be a little more gruff because he's not really friends with these people. And then you get their sound guy, who is a little bit of the nerd, and he's going to be a little bit more scared of the woods. And I really wish they just called him a B camera operator, because that's kind of what he is. But also, they talk about how, like, we need him here recording sound. And there's points in the movie where he's canonically not recording sound. But I'm watching the DVD at home and the sound's fine. And I get they're not gonna mess up their own sound for the sake of being continuity, you know? But still, it does ruin the illusion a bit when they talk about how bad the sound would be without him, and it's totally passable. But anyway, filmmaker rant, let's get back on track. It turns out, in the small town where she grew up, one woman every 10 years would be mysteriously murdered and their bodies would be found in the woods, and they would eventually arrest this guy for it. And she said when she was growing up, he was like the boogeyman. In fact, they rewrite the 1-2 Freddy's Coming For You song to be about him. Again, a little bit distracting, but whatever. But she kind of got disillusioned when she grew up and found out this guy probably didn't do it. They had no real evidence, and they basically just interrogated him until they made him confess. He was the town's creep, and they needed somebody. And when they interview this guy, it's actually one of the better scenes in the movie, because he conveys both being innocent and creepy, where he's there and he's biting his nails down way too far, and he's talking about the FBI setting him up, which honestly sounds like a better movie than what we got. I'm told there's a really good found footage horror called The Conspiracy, and I'll probably try to check that out soon. But anyway, they talk to the townspeople, and we do get shots of the townspeople being creepy like an old woman watching their cabin, and you kind of get that, like, some of them totally think he did it, and some of them aren't quite too sure. And again, it's the opening section of Blair Witch. Blair Witch had better lore, and I think that's what we get here. Like, the true crime thing, it's not quite deep enough. It's a super simple story of they needed someone and they railroaded this guy. Maybe there's a little bit more that we find out going on towards the end, but it's not super complex, and I really wanted more to dig my teeth into. And then the titular vampire barely gets any time in this opening section. They had to kind of divide this section amongst the true crime and the vampire section, and in turn it felt like neither was fleshed out enough. And when you're going in the woods and being hunted by the vampire, don't I wish we heard a little bit more about the vampire? So yeah, the lore section isn't that great, but they're off to go into the woods to see the side of a body, and it takes them 3 days to get there. Okay, I get going to where a murder victim was found would be interesting for your documentary. 3 days there, 3 days back, that's almost a solid week of just walking. Like, gee, that sounds like a lot. and their backpacks aren't huge. Like, you're telling me that in those tiny backpacks, you brought both a week's worth of food and water and all your camera equipment? Camera people will complain about having to lug their camera gear deep into the woods because, you know, it's big and heavy, but to carry all your camera gear for a solid week back and forth into the woods, and it doesn't seem super bulky? Okay, I get it. I'm getting caught on another tangent. How scary is the Scary Woods? They're okay. Again, the Blair Witch did it better. I'm looking out into these woods and it's snowy, and I like the snow. The snow's cool. Looks a little peaceful though, not gonna lie. A nice little blanket of snow. Maybe if they had color graded this movie better and made it look more dreary, that might have helped. But the nice snow reflecting the sunlight, making the scene even brighter, and all the leaves fall off the trees, increasing visibility. Blair Witch Woods was scarier. Maybe if the snow was more intense, but I know you can't control the weather, so what you gonna do? But also, like, the stickman in Blair Witch was much better than the spray-painted symbols. The idea that someone would be out there making this stuff and then, like, leaving it by your tent at night, that's super creepy. Much creepier than finding someone left a symbol somewhere. And, like, the thing will poke at their tent. I guess it's not enough build-up, because it's just kind of like, oh, it's poking at the tent now. It's something that would be scary in real life, but it never really got me. Now, in the Blair Witch, they get lost. It's super hard to figure out where they're going. All the woods look alike, and they start to argue and turn on each other. Again, it's the same thing here, but just not done as well. It seems more like they're annoyed with each other than they're on the edge of sanity, about to snap at one another. The Blair Witch was just more intense in that regard too. But anyway, the movie gets to a point, basically when the vampire shows up, that it does diverge more, and seeing the vampire, it can get a little goofy at times, and I'm not gonna lie and say it's the scariest thing ever, but we do get a little bit more about what's going on with the plot when we finally get to this final segment, and I think it does save the movie from being ultimately forgettable, and it does give it a little something, you know, so I think it does kind of save itself at the end. It's not a classic, and the mockbuster element is super distracting, but it is watchable. It does have some of its own ideas. It's fun to be in the snowy woods, even if it isn't super scary, and at the end of the day, it's an okay, totally watchable film. If you're found footage junkies, you'll probably eat this up more than someone who's not the biggest fan of the genre. It's okay. It's a B-side, maybe a C-side. It's fine, but yeah, not the best thing ever. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my found footage playlist. I've talked about Rec, Paranormal Activity, VHS, Troll Hunter. You guys might like this if you like goofy creatures. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.